I'm so happy that so many of you joined to the session, Stop Treating Accessibility as an Afterthought, because it's such a, strong feeling that I have for this topic. So thank you so much. So for those of you that don't know me, I am Manuela. I am a Flutter meetup organizer of Berlin, and I'm currently working at Flaconi. So first of all, I want to start with a story about inclusion. So when I was a child, I used to draw a lot of pictures, and my family came together and always looked at my pictures. And I noticed one thing special. My grandfather did not have the same reaction as my other family members. And that was when I learned that he's actually blind. And then I started to ask a lot of questions to my grandfather. How do you walk? How do you read? How do you write? And when I asked him, how do you write? He showed me how to write in Braille with a stick and a paper. And while I had this tiny needle in my hand, I had a great idea. I could make a picture that my grandfather could perceive. So I just used this needle and stuck it through the paper so he could feel basically all the animals or people that I was drawing. And interestingly enough, all the other artworks that I drew in my lifetime were thrown away at some point, but this particular artwork is still hanging at my grandfather's office. So while I was researching for this talk, I was talking with a lot of people with disabilities, and one thing they all had in common was that they wanted to be included. And technology is a big part of our society. So if you think of Instagram, sharing the most fun parts of our lives and seeing the most fun parts of our friends' lives is ingrained in our daily lives. And another big part is autonomy. So everyone, from a toddler to an older person, wants to do everything they can on their own, without the help of others. So being included is in a way a human right and super important for the human experience of life. And we as tech people have the power to include those people, and with our expertise as people working in tech, I want to show you a few things how we can make their lives a little bit easier. So first of all, I want to talk about what is accessibility. Accessibility is the practice of making your digital products as usable by as many people as possible. So what does that mean? That means this is not only for people who are disabled. It's actually a common misconception that people think accessibility is only important for people with disabilities, but it's rather a way of rethinking usability. And accessibility usually benefits all people. So why should we work on that, you might ask? So first of all, we want to be good people, so we want to work on accessible apps. And also 1.3 billion people are affected. And these are roughly 16% of the whole world population. And this is a quite significant number. And if this amount was not convincing for you, you should maybe look at the law. So in June 28, 2025, all new digital products need to be accessible, otherwise you can be fined. And there was also a law already in place in America. And there was, for instance, this little case, Robles v. Domino's Pizza in 2019. There was a visually impaired person who wanted to order pizza, but was unable to do so. And there was the settlement of $25,000, and this was a settlement. This didn't go through a whole trial, so the fine could have been much higher. So that is one thing to note. And in the EU, there will be also fines coming into place, but each country will decide on their own fine. But probably they will get some inspiration from the USA. So to be compliant, because we don't want to get sued, we have to remember this combination of letters and numbers. So WCAG 2.1 level AA. Let's break it down. WCAG means Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So those are principles that were made by the World Wide Web Consortium. And those principles are, you have to have a perceivable app, an operable app, understandable, and a robust app. You can read more about it on w3.org. I put a little link on my slides, and I will publish the slides later, so you can actually also click on it. Then let's break down level AA. So there are 3 levels of accessibility, and the A is the least amount of accessibility, and AAA is the most accessible level. And we have to shoot right in the middle to be compliant, and it's AA. And this you can also check on WCHG website. So, how is Flutter handling accessibility? So, Flutter takes accessibility super serious and works on improving the experience continuously. So, whenever you see an issue concerning accessibility, there's a very high response rate and things are getting high priority. And whenever you use some widgets from Flutter or material widgets, you always have a label or a tooltip to ensure accessibility with screen readers to add semantics. So, what are semantics, you might ask? So, semantics are informations that will be read by a screen reader, so a visually impaired person can navigate through your app. When we look here at this counter app that we all know, we have a few widgets that I drew like box around, and each of those widgets have a node in the so-called widget tree in Flutter. And there's not only a widget tree, there's also a semantics tree. And interestingly enough, the widget tree looks different to the semantics tree. Why is that? So, when we go back, you see here this floating action button. And when I am a visual impaired user and use a screen reader, I want to know that the floating action button increments the counter, and I don't need to know that there is a plus icon. So that's why the semantics tree looks different than the widget tree. And this is basically a little chart how the semantics tree is created. So when we write widgets, we create a widget tree, and this widget tree creates the element tree, which stores some state or other info, which stores the render tree. And the render tree creates the semantic tree, which converts to the platform-specific objects. So for instance, UI accessibility for iOS or accessibility node info for Android. So Flutter is multi-platform, as you might know, and support is given for accessibility to mobile and to desktop since Flutter 3.0, and also in web. And in web, you will notice something very interesting, because when you navigate to a Flutter website, you will hear about an invisible accessibility button that you have to turn on. When turning that button on, the semantic tree gets built. So the semantics tree is not built by default on Flutter Web, just to improve the performance of Flutter Web. So with a little luck, we can hear it. If not, I'm just gonna
Enable accessibility button. You are currently on a button inside web content. To click this button, press Control, Option, Space. To exit. Reply and efficient. Focused email app group. Shrine a fashionable retail app group. Rally a personal finance app group. Crane a personalized travel app group. Build apps for banner. Visited link image. Flutter. List 5 items. Link. Multi-platform. Link.
So I hope you heard it. So the first one was Flutter Web. You hear an accessibility button. The second one was a traditional website where you don't hear about an accessibility button. So now let's talk how to identify issues and how to fix them in our apps. So let's imagine we are all working on an app and we want to determine how the accessibility of our app is. So we decide to perform an audit. And an audit is a way to check the current status quo. So if you have been to Daria's talk today, you know what an audit is. So we want to know what is good and what is also bad, because we want to fix it. And we can never do that as someone who is actually affected, or never do that as good as someone who is actually affected. But in order to get a good idea on how our accessibility level is, we should definitely do that. Of course, we could use a tool like accessibility tools by Rebel App Studios to check for accessibility issues. So it will show you a yellow and black border when you forgot about a semantic label, or if the tab area is too small. Or we could also use an accessibility scanner that was made by Google, which you can download from the Google Play Store, with which you can scan your app. But I want to show you how to do a manual accessibility audit. So I want you, if you go home after the FlutterCon and you had an amazing time, to check your app with the actual accessibility settings. So when we want to check for accessibility on a device, do we choose a simulator or a real device? And the answer is easy. We choose a real device because the accessibility settings are so much more present there than on the simulator because they are very limited there. Also, a little quick tip from my side, add accessibility to your shortcuts because it can get quite hard to navigate out of screen readers when you are in the screen reader mode and get out of an app. So, before we start our audit, we need to understand what kind of disabilities there are to check for. So, there are mental health conditions, there are mobility impairments, cognitive impairments, hearing impairments, and visual impairments. And we need to know how those disabilities affect people so we can effectively check our app. So now, meet Bear Buddies. This is the app we want to check. So actually we are in Berlin. It's a dad joke, so that's why it's a bear app. So you have to laugh now. Sorry, it was very bad. So let's start our accessibility audit. So the first thing we want to check is large font. And large font is one of the most used accessibility settings because it's used by people that are getting older also. Like, it's just a thing about eyesight. My parents are using large font. And when we started to look into accessibility at Flaconi, where I'm working at, we implemented a analytics event to check if users are scaling their font. And actually, around 25% of our users are scaling up their font. So it's the most used accessibility feature, I would say. And there's also a statistic by appt.org that it definitely is. So if we turn on large font, we see this at the Bear app. So we have constrained this text somehow, and you see with this red border that something is cut off there. So the text is not scaling. So I deliberately made the size a little bit smaller so the text would get cut off. So the problem is the text is too big to fit the widget, and the reason is that we have laws of the universe. If a widget has 500 pixels of height and the text has 600 pixels without being cut, like it's gonna be cut off. So solutions, what can we do? We could use dynamic sizing, so we could use the media query text scale factor and multiply by some value to have a box, for instance, that grows with our text size, or we could also make it scrollable. So it's just about a thing to talk with your UX designer how it should handle it. So then we have this. Some text did not get scaled. What happened? So the problem is that the text did not scale. The reason is we might have used rich text, which doesn't scale up, or we used some constrained font size in some way. So if you have been to the demystifying text rendering talk yesterday, there was a little section about that too. So solution, use text.rich instead of rich text, because that one will scale up and will do exactly the same as rich text. Yeah, or don't use some packages that will constrain something. So after checking scaled fonts, let's talk about colors and contrast. Who knows what a color vision impairment is here in this room? Nice. So We see here a color vision impairment is a condition in which persons with this condition are seeing colors very differently. So we're seeing here this little image. So you see here the true colors and then the 3 ways a color vision impaired person can see those colors. And so if any one of you sees twice the same bar in this picture, it might mean that you have like a color vision impairment actually. And we can check color vision impairment by setting simulate color space on our Android phone. And it will put a filter over our phone and it will look as if we have a color vision impairment. And this can be also done by iOS, just add some color filters. So, and if we do so in our app, we can see that it looks quite the same, the giant panda and the brown bear, but they're quite different in danger level. So, let's check. Actually, it is really, the brown bear is actually really dangerous, so we should not only show this, those danger levels with a color, rather than we could rather use a text to show, hey, it has a danger level of high or a danger level of low, because we don't want our dash to get hurt, right? So let's check contrast. So a sufficient contrast is important for everyone, also with people with usual eyesight, and your text and images should have around 4.5 to 1 contrast against the background. And I made here a little slide with some contrast levels. And as you can see, it gets better and better the better or the higher the contrast ratio is actually. So contrast for text should be 4.5 to 1. So let's check now for screen readers. When thinking of accessibility, most people think only of screen readers. But it has so much more, as you have seen. So large font is a big topic, colors and contrast is a big topic, but also screen readers. So I want to show you now how a blind person uses an app. I personally believe that it's super important to see how a blind person really uses an app, because most of us may not know. So one person I interviewed for this talk was super kind and let me allow to film how it's using an app with a voiceover.
Gerne Zeit verbringen.
So, everybody understood everything? So, as you have heard, it's quite information dense. So each of those words or each of those informations that we have heard right now are semantics or semantics labels. And as I told you before, if you use Flutter widgets of material, for instance, you'll always have a label or tooltip. But if you do anything custom, you probably need semantics. How does it work? So semantics is basically a widget where you can add some information that you want the screen reader to pick up. So I have here this little ink widget with my bear image, and I want to say that it's a grizzly bear sitting on a stone with its tongue out. So basically, it's a wrapper with an information. And we have a lot of different properties in semantics widget. We could talk all day about them, but I want to specifically point out one of them. It's the sort key, because I think it's quite interesting. Because with the sort key, you can specify what widget will be read first from the screen reader. So I have here some videos, and one did not load, I think.
Accessibility project. Last. Second. First.
Okay, this was without sort key, so it goes from top to bottom. And the next one.
First. Second. Last.
So basically, I gave a sort key from the bottom to the top, and it changes the accessibility traversal. And that one is different than the focus traversal. So, merge semantics. Merge semantics is quite handy when we want to merge two semantic nodes together and it be read as one. So it's quite nifty and fun when you have like checkboxes and want them to have the same information, or the information should be read as one. So it's also very easy. You just wrap it around the things you want to be read together. And when we look at
danger level,
yeah,
high. Danger level, high.
I was too overeager with the videos. So basically, when we have it without merge semantics, we have to click twice. So we have to navigate twice to hear all the information. But with merge semantics, we have to only navigate once and we hear it in one go, which is nice. Then block semantics, it's a widget that drops the semantics of all widgets that were painted before it in the semantic container. And that means it's very nice, for instance, for pop-ups. So you only want the attention of the screen reader or of the user to be on the pop-up and not on anything that is behind it. So here we have a block semantics. It's the same thing. You just wrap it around the thing that you want to be focused on. So.
Warning, bear behind you. Warning, bear behind you.
So I navigated twice actually, and you couldn't navigate on something else. So block semantic actually works, so that's nice. Then exclude semantics you can use when you want to exclude something from your screen reader experience. So if you have an icon that you don't want to be read out or whatever, then you can just wrap it around wrap exclude semantics around that widget, and it will be excluded. So for instance, a text. So I excluded this big bare body text, the introduction text. You would never do that in real life because you would want this to be read out, but for the sake of an example, I did.
Hi bear body. Brown bear, image, brown bear.
So it just jumped over the text. So here I have compiled a little vision checklist. I will release these slides later on today, so you can take this home and maybe do some checklists or work through the checklist with your app that is already existing. So then gestures. Let's go very quickly over gestures. So gestures are very important for for everyone because the target areas, for instance, for a button, need to be big enough that everyone can click on them, right? And also, when we think of page views or something, when we have only one hand available for different multi-pointer gestures or something, then yeah, we have to think of how to customize this experience. And there's a nice study done by UX Matters. They were thinking of how do users hold their phones, and 50% of users hold their phones with one hand. So that actually shows already that it's really important to optimize your experience on one hand. And this has to do also with the thumb reachability. If your thumb, if you're holding your hand on your right hand, your thumb reachability is different than when you have a combined way of holding your phone or you hold it on the left side. So it's, for instance, for button placements, which is also a part of accessibility. So the gestures checklist, check for target areas. They have to have a specific size, so 48 to 48 pixels, material design, or 44 to 44 pixels on Cupertino. And you should evaluate your gesture widgets and offer customization. For instance, when you have a pinch to zoom, that can be quite hard when you have only one hand, and that is also something that I would find useful. I have always this big bag with me, and it's super heavy, and I have only one hand, and if I have to do some pinch to zoom, it's gonna be quite hard, so a double tap to zoom would be very nice for me to have. So if you have any multi-pointer gestures, why not offer customizations in your settings? Now let's go to the cognitive audit, because accessibility also includes cognitive conditions. And when we look at linkscars.com, it's a very popular example with UX designers, actually, to show how you might not want to design your app. We actually have a few accessibility issues here. So first of all, it's super flashy. So someone who has seizures might be triggered from that. And also there are lots of animations. So someone with ADHD will be completely like sidetracked by maybe some of those animations. And it's hard to really get the information from this website. And being accessible has to do also a lot with easy content. So yeah, that is one thing to avoid. I've also added again a cognition checklist, so you can look at it later. So now that we talked about all the semantic widgets, let's talk about implementing accessibility. Let's talk about testing for accessibility, sorry. So testing for accessibility is a wonderful way to see if you broke something when you touched code. So let's be honest, when we write code, we're gonna touch it again, and we're gonna refactor it. And tests will give you the confidence to refactor and sleep well at night. So this is a little sentence that I picked from Alicia, my colleague's talk from DroidCon London last year. So in Flutter, we have the accessibility guideline class in our testing API, and it will help us check if we comply with the requirements set by VCAG. So for instance, you can check your tab target areas or text contrast. This is how a test might look. So you can test very quickly for the requirements. Then you can test for overflows with scaled fonts. Just have this media query and use this text scale factor to scale your text, so you can check for some overflows that might break your UI. So then check semantics during tests. So with this test, you can basically verify if your tooltip or your label is there. One thing to note with this test, though, it's not a fuzzy match, so it has to be very exact. You have to be very specific what you're looking for, and this can be very interesting, for instance, when you have a login screen and you want to check if the label of the login screen is actually existing, or if it's active or inactive, and that might be very interesting to check. I would not suggest to check your whole app with semantics or test your whole semantics in your apps. Rather the most important flows, so basically the main features of your app. So then you can also test the UX for screen readers. That's actually where the simulated accessibility traversal comes into play. So we were talking just now about how to sort the screen reader experience. So it was the videos where we had this first, second, and last widget. That were read like the other way around. And this is how we can, for instance, check it if that is how we expect it, and fix something if it's not how we expected it. If anything in the tests break or don't work, we can use debug dump semantics tree. It will just print out your whole semantic nodes, and you can check if something is existing or if something is missing. So it's quite interesting if you want to see the whole semantics tree. You can also visualize semantics. So this widget is very useful if you want to understand how an app presents itself to an assistive technology. So it will just show you a border around each of those little semantics. I have here again a testing checklist that you can check on later. So let's go quickly over the process of adding accessibility to your current project. Spoiler alert, it doesn't change a lot, but you have to communicate and be aware. So it all boils down on where the problems are in your app and how you communicate with your team members. So for instance, for designer and developer communication, it's very important to be aware of any things that could break your app. So if you have large fonts or scale your font, what should happen with a specific widget, right? Or if you have, like at Flaconi, some ads, they should not be only on an image. They should be also in a written form, because someone who might not be able to see doesn't see those advertisements. So those should be a text. And for communication between designers and developers, we have our friends at Widgetbook that make it a little bit easier. So that's maybe a tool that you can check out. So, and also having checklists to ensuring that you're not forgetting anything is quite important. It's quite self-explanatory, but you could, for instance, have a checklist when you open up a PR if you checked for scaled fonts, if you checked with a screen reader your whole app experience, so you already know that the feature that you have written is sufficiently accessible. Even Flutter has a checklist for accessibility, and if you want to read more about it, just head to flutter.dev and search for the accessibility release checklist. So, lastly, I want to talk about the voices of the affected, because I think it's so important to give those people a voice, because to help people using our apps, we need to know how their actual experiences are with them. So, things break sometimes with updates. That's a very interesting one. So, when I was having this interview, I was talking with Batuan, that is the guy that allowed me to film the screen reader experience. He likes to use Instagram. And at the moment, the story feature of Instagram is broken for screen readers. So you can only see who watched your stories when this person actually reacted on your stories, not everyone. So he told me it's a real struggle that he has to go through a list of hundreds of friends that watched the story but did not react. He has to click on those names and or on those items actually, and then goes to the profiles and see or hear their names. So that's quite interesting. So you will see this now.
Manuela, Sakura, Rommel updated their story 2 hours ago with a photo. Blue sky, cloudy, lamppost, roof, window. Story viewers, story viewers. Story thumbnail 1 of 1, 45 viewers, button. Settings, close, viewers, but delete, but viewers, heading. Viewers, heading, 7.590. Jasmine. More. But, direct message. Alicia Oganowska reacted with face with heart-shaped eyes. Adult. Logo other. Night sky. Painting. Porthole. Adult. Night sky. Porthole. Adult. Logo other. Night sky.
So you can hear, actually, iOS reads out picture descriptions. So they check for the image and they will assume what's on there. And yeah, that's what you heard. So you heard actually the profile pictures description, but not the profile name. Yeah, exactly. So a new pattern can be a blocker. So when I interviewed Batuan, he navigated to YouTube because he wanted to show me how YouTube works and how he is using YouTube. And actually, a YouTube Premium ad popped up. And he needed to navigate out of that because it was a new pattern for him. He didn't see this ad before. And he struggled a little bit. And I was actually just filming it. And it's quite interesting to see him trying to find a way.
Musik-Downloads. Hol dir eine eigene App, 1 Monat Test, 1 Musik, hol dir Music.
So you see him struggling there a little bit. He did it in the end, but still, just remember, whenever you introduce a new pattern, someone who's using a screen reader might struggle. Then I get inventive when an app is not accessible to perform an action. So a very popular app called Snapchat has a broken main feature. So currently you cannot add friends or do anything on the add friends screen actually with the screen reader. And it's broken for a few months. Batuan told me that he asked them to fix it. Like he wrote a lot of bug reports, but they never even replied to him. So yeah, and he told me there's one nifty trick he has when he's using this app and is navigating accidentally on that screen. He's killing the app. So it's actually a super sad story as a developer for me to hear. So I also want to show you how it looks.
Friends, add friends. Chart, chart, screenshot, chart, screenshot, chart, screenshot, chart, screenshot, chart.
So you can't do anything. So what you hear is something in the background, but it's not Snapchat. You can't navigate. Nothing at all. So you have seen that even the biggest players in the game are sometimes breaking something with accessibility. And with this talk, I wanted to mostly invoke empathy in each one of you, because we are the people that can actually change how the experience for people in need for accessible apps are. And I know that accessibility is not the most fun code to implement. It's not the most juicy feature to pick up, but it really helps people. And I would like to see more accessible apps in the future, because I see we're talking a lot about accessibility, but actually implementing accessibility is still a big way to go. So thank you so much for joining my talk. It was wonderful to see each one of you, and this is actually a little QR code to rate my talk. I want to get better, of course, and if you have any input or even questions, you can write me them there or even ask them now. On my Twitter account today, I will write a little thread, a little TLDR for this talk. So you have all those tips and tricks that I mentioned in one Twitter thread, and there I will also post my slides. Thank you so much for listening to me. Have a nice day.